Jim friends and welcome. I'm Antonio and this is the first episode of the Grass Friends podcast. Here I will learn and share anything related to regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming, and even regenerative finance. If you don't know what that is, just keep listening because today I had the pleasure to talk with Antonio Paglino and Matthieu Legavre, Tornatore di Noto. Yes, three surnames. Two great guys with completely different stories who now both live in Sicily and are just starting a project in the Refi agrosphere. If you're familiar with DeFi, that stands for decentralized finance, the concept is very easy for you to grasp. Anyway, I will be learning this with you during this podcast. In this specific episode, we talked about permaculture, Refi, moving from San Francisco to Sicily, and selling NFTs yielding olive oil. So, let's get into the episode with Antonio Paglino and Matteo Legavre, Tornatore di Noto. Enjoy!
So I'm originally from Florida, born and raised. My family ancestry on my father's side is Sicilian. So my great grandparents left Sicily in the 1920s after World War One, went to New York, met, married, settled down, had kids. Those kids grew up. My grandfather moved the family from New York to Florida in the 1960s. He worked as a airline mechanic and then eventually kind of like worked his way up. My grandfather ended up retiring with UPS. He helped UPS set up their own airline in Louisville, Kentucky, which I didn't know until I was older. When you're a kid, you don't really know like what the parents, grandparents, you have no history background, especially in the U.S. because the family history and heritage is so disconnected from everyday life. So I grew up with, I guess, Sicilian food culture because my father and grandfather loved to cook. I was actually the worst cook in the family, so I had to learn later in life. So I went to school for economics. I graduated in 2008, and if we remember back then, there was a big financial crash. So I was very fortunate because my last year in college, I was able to study abroad in China. I was interested in the Chinese economic miracle, which basically brought the most people out of poverty in the shortest amount of time. But the miracle could also be considered like a dystopia because to create that economic growth, you had to destroy a lot of um, ecology and nature. And it wasn't like, sure, China economy growing, but that was to feed, America and the West's appetite for cheap products. So I really dug deep into understanding the history of globalization. Um, I ended up moving to China, lived and worked there for about 5 years in total in my 20s. And my first like real job out after college was actually doing podcast production in Beijing, teaching Mandarin online. So I've always been interested in
Wow.
technology, been interested in sustainability. How does culture play a role? Ended up moving back to the U.S. in 2012, and I was writing a travel guide in my grandparents' basement in Kentucky. So fortunately for me, I was able to reconnect with my grandparents, learn more about their life um, when I was an adult, and that was really important because leaving the U.S., going to China, the farther you go, the more you appreciate coming back and what you have in terms of um, family,
True.
family heritage. So I was able to spend a lot of time with them and ended up moving to San Francisco. So I was basically in and out of San Francisco for about 10 years, working similarly in tech and sustainability. And ended up moving back to China to Shenzhen. And Shenzhen is basically a fishing village turned into like a economic
The
powerhouse.
opposite.
Well, I mean, so if you take a traditionally agricultural society and you put it onto economic steroids,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you get. So I was able to get a front row seat into how manufacturing works, front row seat into how like global supply chain logistics work, front row seat into like Tencent, Baidu, like basically Chinese tech powerhouses. And then meanwhile, travel back to San Francisco. I was a contractor at Facebook, doing different types of like contract jobs for different startups. Meanwhile, very curious in crypto. I first got introduced to crypto in 2014. with a background in Web 2 economics. It was just like a natural fit. And my goal has always been, how do we take this technology, make it culturally relevant so that we can empower communities and people to basically make the change that we want to see into more equitable and fair society. So I did a startup in between Florida and California from 2015 to 2019 around rainwater harvesting, connecting it to the internet, and creating a decentralized utility grid using both
Hmm.
IoT and blockchain. And of course, nobody wanted to invest in that because it was just like too crazy. So I ended up pausing that. And then I basically went on a trip to Europe in 2017, first time to Italy. And I knew that I could, like, I kind of knew in the back of my head I could pursue citizenship because of my family heritage. And so that started the process, a multi-year process of getting all the family documentation. And I finally moved to Italy full time in 2021. Um, got my citizenship, and uh, I skipped over a little part because 2019 was the first time I went to Sicily, and Matthieu was organizing a seed ball reforestation project with the help of this guy Kutlan, who is a Turkish guy who travels around Italy and Europe teaching these seed ball and natural farming workshops. So I basically came, volunteered, sleeping on Matthew's in the kitchen. I don't know what the extra bedroom in the living room. And so yeah, we've been on mission ever since. And now I'm here full time in Sicily. I have my citizenship and basically doing community organizing work around regenerative finance. And when I first told Matthew about Refi, regenerative finance, he interpreted it as Refi, which is do over, redo. So that actually created a unique opportunity for how do
Yeah.
we translate regenerative finance, which, I mean, even in English, nobody knows what that is, let alone nobody knows what DeFi is. So refi
Yeah.
is very natural, and it's going to help create a cultural communication bridge so that we can bring this technology into the community without it alienating and pushing people away. So this was like this was not planned. It was kind of an accident, but here we are. And yeah, so this fall we're going to get more organized for the olive harvest, while at the same time the other issue here is forest fires, both from deforestation, the the breakdown of the water cycle, as well as like arson from cultural trauma. So we have an interesting opportunity to take some of these small family farms, provide them with tools, training, resources to transition to regenerative agriculture, syntropic agroforestry, and use that as an anchor and a foundation to build a local circular economy with the crypto Web3 tools. So that's where we're at right now.
How are the people now welcoming these things? Are they accepting it, or you
Well,
find
I
some
mean,
pushback?
Matthew can speak more to it because we've been having these conversations for multiple years. Like, I helped Matthew set up a Coinbase account and just kind of having more technical discussions one on one. But for the broader community, we're not talking so much in technical terms. We're
Hmm.
talking more about practical logistics of how do we get plants in the ground, what are some resources that we can provide, as well as education for the people who are interested in how the technology works. So we've actually partnered with a local development team in Ragusa, and they have a platform for
Hmm.
an event platform where you're selling event tickets as NFTs, but they have it so that you create an account and the wallet
Okay.
uh, is already embedded. So that helps to just, you don't even have to say sign up with Coinbase. You don't have to explain what a
Oh, cool.
wallet is. We don't have to explain what's happening on the back end
Yeah.
unless they ask. And I'd be curious to hear Matthew's point of view because I think
Yeah.
Matthew's coming from more of a permaculture gardening and landscape background.
Yeah. Cool. I think it's a good timing to jump in.
France. So that was the 50s, I think, 40s, 50s. So it was just after the Second World War. And my parents meet there. My mother is French, and she was living in France. And then they had me really young. My mother was 19 and my father 25, and they decided to come back to Sicily. So that was really crazy decision. Thinking about the time that they were designing that was 90s. So I was born in 1991. So basically they decided to come back in Sicily, and that was really hard for them to figure it out how to build a life in Sicily, because the cultural and everything was really different. You can imagine like South Europe at this time was really like more North Africa than South Europe. So so yeah, I grew up in Palermo, but still having always having a connection with French family. So we were going in France every year for 1 month or 2 weeks or whatever, and that was really helpful for me. You know, when you go out from a country and you see it from another point of view, that gives you more possibilities to understand what's working, what is really like not working, etc. So it was really good for me. Yeah, I basically grew up in Palermo, and also I had a lot of connection in Sicily and in France about like farm, countryside, like agriculture, because I have uncle there that are farming, and my grandparents were really attached to their land here in Sicily. So that was really good for me to have a really early understanding, not understanding, like living the nature, and it was really fulfilling me. So since really young I had this kind of attachment, so that was really good. So after my 80s 90s I decided to not continue with the academic. In Sicily we all like when you finish the high school you have to go to the university to
Yeah.
etc. And I was really out of that. I didn't want to stuck myself in this kind of life. That wasn't my idea. So, but I discovered that I really wanted to work in agriculture field. So that was pretty much my goal. And so I discovered permaculture at this time thanks to internet. I mean, I was just starting to search about anything, like, because at school we don't have any kind of inputs about agriculture or even botany or even just science, how do you call it, biological science.
So you didn't study in high school like agriculture stuff, like no agraria, right? Okay.
I was a scientific high school, so yeah,
Same.
and really there was nothing about no agriculture, nothing. So and then I discovered that here actually that was really the click. I really said, okay, that's what I want to do. And here in Scopello, where now me and Anthony we are living, um, because we have there's already a kind of we can say a community, like a really spread community in the area. So we are a lot of friends now living here, and there's some elders, like for example Vito, Anthony knows him, that it was at his place that he asked me to harvest some almonds because he didn't have the time. And at this time I discovered, like, okay, I really love to do that, just harvesting almonds. I don't get any money for that, but I get almonds. That was so cool. This time I discovered like that was my way. So I decided to take a sabbatic here. You say in English? Sorry for my English. I
Sabbatical.
went in Australia because my father at this time were
Hmm.
living there. So I asked him to just pay me the tickets and go in Australia to discover this fantastic world that like was so crazy for me. And it's where like by total casuality I didn't know about that. At one time I was in the place where Zaituna farm is. I don't know if you know Zaituna farm. It's like the most like representing permaculture reality in the world, I can say, probably right now. It's the Joe Flauton farm, which is also a school, of course, and is one of the most brilliant students of Bill Mollison, which is the co-founder of permaculture. So, so yeah, that was amazing. I discovered that casually, and I was like so astonished by not only the philosophy but the method of working.
Since we're here, can you make like a definition? What are the main concepts of permaculture and what stuck with you?
Yes, I'll try to make it easy. It's not really easy, but We generally we call it a design method. There's of course an ethical and philosophical background about it, and it's about how we are behaving and living the planet Earth, which is of course totally like disconnected from the natural mechanism and from the ecology itself. Like we are today completely disconnected from that, and permaculture is a kind of tool that you use to build micro ecosystems that are designed and lived by humans. So they both have the purpose of regenerating our natural environment and at the same time providing all our needs, which are food, housing, of course, social life, etc. So it's a tool, it's a method, and there's a lot of definition you can find about, and it's not so much about the techniques, it's more about the method itself, and then you can apply it in many ways in your personal way. So the creativity and the feedbacks are really the core of the evolution of the system. So yeah, I try to explain it easy.
I've read something about permaculture already, mostly because my girlfriend went in a camp about it. So she told me something about it. But what scared me the most was how much time it takes to design something that works. But maybe this is just a false myth.
If you
So yeah,
design
yeah, the thing
something
is like you have to
incorrectly, it'll take more time.
Yeah, that's even worse.
thing is that there is not a good or bad way. I mean, there's of course you start from not making mistakes, which are normally are like you can really notice they are mistakes. So you start from that, and but there's not a perfect design. It cannot exist. All it's about once you design it, then how it evolving. So how nature is answering to what you made. So the really important thing is to start small and then having feedbacks that give you the understanding of how things are working, which nobody really knows, not even scientifics, because they are living, so they're in the time framework. I don't know how to say, but you have to implement your idea and then wait for nature to give you the answer. Like what I did, was it working, was not working, etc. And then you get the feedback, and then you fix your way to do. You know what I mean? So, but what you need is like normally, if you read the manual, it's like 1 year, 1 full year to only observe the place, the land, to evaluate all the data, like geometry, like the rain rate, the exposure to sun, the temperature, the wind, even the people around you, so your neighbors, the animals, like everything. And all this data will give you an idea on where are you and how things are working there. So then you can start design. Normally it works like that. Here we don't take 1 year because we already know the place pretty much, we already know how it's working, etc. So that's only the start. After this 1 year of observing and collecting data, so you can start designing. And you design, like your goal is to regenerate and to not waste all the energy resource that nature is providing to you, like water, sunlight, etc. So even the genetic resource, so like the plants that are living in this place, for example. I think like it depends on what is your place, etc. But it can take like a couple of years to have a good system that is well designed.
What I know is that once it's running, you can say that it's very low touch. Actually, almost no touch at all. Like you don't have to make that much to except for harvest.
It's really ideal first. So it, how do you say it? The issue is like to do that in the system we are living now, which is pretty much like the aim is not to be connected to nature, but is to have money, because money is the real goal. So the thing is like trying to transition from this kind of view of aim to another one without like falling in desperation. Which is not easy, of course, but it's our work. It's what we have to do for this generation, I think.
And if I can just make the
Antonio?
link here, yeah, from DeFi to refi, like there's a pathway here because decentralized finance is this idea of borrowing, lending, and earning yield, right? Like you put some tokens in, you can earn interest. Um, what does regenerative yield look like in a permaculture setting? Because if you plant a fruit tree, you plant a nut tree, you're getting yield, and you're also improving soil, and you're also increasing water retention, and you're increasing biodiversity, and you're increasing you're stacking all these functions together, so that instead of getting 1% on your savings, you're getting 100%, right? Like by year 7, your fruit tree is pumping. You're at the point now where you can't even give it away for free because you have too much. So I think there is a connection here when we talk about regenerative finance to actually look at how are ecosystems regenerating themselves? What are the yields? How do we harvest in a sustainable manner? And normally, the rule of thumb is 80-20, where if you keep 80% of the forest intact, you can be harvesting 20% every year. So going from DeFi to Refi, we need to look with the permaculture lens what is producing the actual yield. Because if you go into like some degen yield farming thing and you get 1,000% APR, week 1, but then by week
Good old
2,
times.
everything is crashed and imploded. Yeah, that was not sustainable. So Refi gives us an opportunity to say, how can we use our financial resources, our social capital, to invest in living capital, natural capital, so that we can have those sustainable yields? And if you look at it, that's going to be the most profitable thing that we can be doing, is investing in these ecosystems. So I think that we are in the transition from thinking of our economic systems from a kind of human domination over nature to how do we design with nature. And that is, I think, what permaculture really represents, is the harmony between the two. And if you go and look at the Permaculture Designer's Manual, the last chapter is all about how does Earth organize itself in economic systems and political systems. So there's this concept called bioregions, which is how nature organizes itself. And in the Permaculture Designer's Manual, that talks about how do we create bioregional nations. And then within that, how do we create economic Legos, for example, land trusts, worker cooperatives, community currencies, and these different types of building blocks where you can create a local circular economy that's owned and operated, managed by the people. And because that book was written in the 1980s, we now have, 2 generations later, where we have Web3, crypto, blockchain, AI, like IoT, like this whole kind of technosphere of tools that we can upgrade the permaculture philosophy to meet this new paradigm. So I think that's where it gets interesting, is can you design a blockchain with the permaculture design toolkit to be adapted to bioregions? So this is where we get into bioregional blockchains. I'm very deep in the Cosmos ecosystem, region network, and Cosmos has a template to create an interoperable blockchain that can communicate with every other blockchain, versus Ethereum, which is a monolithic blockchain that everything has to conform to that. And if you want to build a bridge, you have to do it custom, and that provides a lot of kind of high overhead security issues. And of course, we're jumping way too far ahead, but there is a connection. And because people don't understand blockchain and people don't understand permaculture, talking about the two seems so foreign, but in fact, it's actually very natural. And this is what we're trying to bring into a more human touch, finesse the culture around the technology and the finances. And what Matthieu was saying is, like, how do we cross that gap without collapsing? And that's kind of where we're at right now. And it's a dance. It's a dance because we have to balance, right? It's not one or the
Okay.
other, and we have to walk a very fine.
That's
Go ahead.
cool thing, for example, about permaculture and about, for example, our friendship with Anthony. One of the really important role in permaculture is to integrate instead of separating. So it's really important for people to understand that we need to connect all these things that are like tools all together, and stopping having fear about, like, like, for example, now there's a big debate about artificial intelligence, etc., but like starting see the solution on the problem. That's another cool thing about permaculture. And another cool thing is that there is not a religion, it's not like we have to do this and this. We have to be really open-minded and change completely our way to with things. So yeah.
I like the fact that it's very bottom up. It's not like something overimposed, but it starts from observation of what actually is already there, and then you build on top of it. And this modularity also, I think, find the perfect match with blockchain. I can definitely see that. Also, I think these big problems like unhealthy soil and these kind of things, climate change and so on, they are global problems, but they cannot be solved like with a top-bottom approach. We need like some cooperation, but it's not easy to cooperate at a massive scale. And in this sense, blockchain solved it already to make people to cooperate without having to trust someone else. So I can definitely see why these things work together. All right. I would like to ask, how is it for Antonio for you to go from Florida, from San Francisco, so populated dense places, to internal areas of Sicily, and what led you to choose to do so?
Well, I think it's been a dream. I've growing up in kind of a suburban setting where I've been exposed to nature but never fully immersed. And then living in multiple large cities, and especially in China, where you're talking about 10 million plus people. And now, as I'm growing older, and as the world is becoming more destabilized, finding stability and grounding in nature is actually one of the most valuable things. I guess it
Nice
must be,
bells.
yeah, time to pray. Um,
Yeah.
so, so for me, this has
You
actually
have
been
that every hour, even at night?
no, I think it's 9 a.m., noon, and yeah, I don't. It's probably 3 or 4 times a day. But what I love about
Okay,
life
reasonable.
here is that the culture is still connected to the land. You're still connected to the seasons. Um, and also, too, I don't look at it as like a disadvantage. I actually look at Sicily as having so much potential because it has been um, deserted, abandoned for so long. Because if I were to go to California or go to Florida, there's so much competition. Everybody's trying to trying to fight each other in terms of like, for example, the startup scene, right? You go to these communities in San Francisco or Miami, New York, whatever it is, and there's such a competitive startup scene there. Everybody's fighting over limited resources, compared to coming into a community, realizing that everybody has to work together to survive. Uh, and I think that's kind of the shift that's happening now, especially as Scapello specifically is. There's so much tourism development, villa complex. There is a kind of an existential threat amongst kind of the older community, and people are starting to wake up, get more motivated, get more organized. Meanwhile, there's a younger generation coming in. There's an international community, semi-permanent, and yeah, I think it's a really nice blend. I think this is like a little microcosm of Sicily. If you go to the next town over, to say Sagesta, um, or even Agrigento, like Castelvetrano, like there's nobody, there's nothing. It's completely empty. So I think we have an opportunity here to create a model that we can then have every other community replicate, both here in Sicily as well as in Italy and as well as in the Mediterranean basin. And I think kind of thinking in that biological regional setting is actually the type of scale that we need, because it's not like traditional Web 2 blitz scaling, Uber, Facebook. Like we're not talking about vertical scaling. We're talking about horizontal cultural scaling, so that each community can bootstrap itself while plugging into every other kind of community resource pool. And then we bring ourselves up together. And so that's the opportunity, because I'm looking at this as, well, where can I do my life's work? I can't do it in Florida. I can't do it in California because it's already too crowded. There's too much regulation in terms of like multiple levels of bureaucracy. And you could say, well, yes, Italy has bureaucracy as well, but it's a different type. Um, and in fact, you can almost get things done quicker here because anybody you work with has a cousin who's working in City Hall. So we actually have all the resources we need here. I think what is happening now is that the external environment is forcing and shaping and pushing us through this kind of transformation process. And that's what I'm hoping for this fall for the Refi Sicily event, is that we can get organized enough so that we are prepared both for the olive harvest as well as implementing these syntropic agroforestry systems. Because it's, everybody says, oh, it's hard to change the culture, but I feel like the culture wants to change, and not change like you're not changing it to something else. It's just evolving because it's still like, the core of the culture, the heart of the culture is going to persist. It's going to get stronger. We're just flowering right now. We're in a bloom spot. So I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a fantastic adventure. If you ask most Americans, like, what's the dream? It's always like retire to Italy. I I'm very culturally fluid. I love to adapt. So, and also too, this feels like home. This feels like home more than it felt like Florida felt like home. So I feel like I have the ancestors behind me. I feel like the community is supportive, and of course, like, if you talk about crypto blockchain, of course people get scared. So we can leave that kind of to the side, and focus on what people really care about, which is the land, which is about family, friends, community, and focus on that. And then that's where things start to get fun and move forward.
Yeah, also for land, I think it's cheaper than the US. So in Italy, there's this arbitrage opportunity for people who want to live a certain lifestyle as you. Italy probably it's one of the best way to do so now, and this is also why I'm doing this podcast with a focus on Italy, but still doing it in English because I don't want to limit the information and so on just to locals, but maybe allowing other international communities to form. And speaking of that, why do you think there's an international community everywhere there, like there in Sicily? They come for the same reason of you, as far as you know, or they're just temporary and like visiting?
Well, right. So I
If
think
you
people come here
are
on
inside of that.
vacation. They get the idea of, oh, it would be great to live here. Then they go onto this wild goose chase of trying to buy a house or a land totally in over their heads. Um, and there's actually no. I think the difference here is people come and treat this place like a vacation house, and I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I don't think that's the way to go either. If you look at it as a calling, the land is calling you to be in service. I think that's the right attitude. And then going back to the land arbitrage situation, where what we need to be doing is taking land outside of the speculative real estate market, putting it back into common land trust, which I believe in Italian it's fideikommiso, um, and then we can use that land as collateral, the regeneration potential, to then help to finance and create that liquidity for the circulating local economy. Because if you don't own the land, and not even own, I'm talking about, you don't want the land to be sold out from under you. You can't do 20, 40-year landscape restoration plans if whoever owns the land is going to sell it to the highest bidder at any time. So there is a way to take the land titles, put it on chain, and then use that as an anchor for the local economy. And I think that's kind of an interesting real world asset transition that few people in crypto are actually talking about. But it requires a permaculture lens to look through to see it holistically. Because if you're just looking at land as an asset to park money in, that's going to just keep repeating the same cycle. So I would say if people do want to come to Italy, do want to come to Sicily, do it because you want to be servicing the land, not because you're looking for a vacation home. And most people are looking for a vacation home.
Yeah, talking about how much work there is to do there, how
So
much
much.
time it takes. Yeah, I can
There's no
imagine.
shortage of
But
work here. Life.
how young people are reacting to this kind of work, because it's for many people it's not that appealing to like to work on a land instead of like doing some online job. Is there already like some good trade-off?
Yeah, talk to Matthieu. He's doing the hands-on stuff. And
Yeah.
to some point, for me, I would personally like to be kind of create a balance where there is the
Uh-huh.
creative digital work and there's also the manual physical labor that provides kind of more vitality and energy. But yeah, I would love to hear Matthieu's response to this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more in the practical for now, but I'd love to like also get more time to design, which is just like maybe 10% of my activity in terms of spend on this. I'm more On the field, yeah, didn't finish my story. So actually, I went in after my travels. I went in France because they have a really good pedagogy, and I mean, whatever it is about technical things, they're really good on teaching. So I made an apprenticeship, an horticulture apprenticeship, 2 years, and that was really fulfilling me of all the techniques in horticulture, so like tomato, potato, etc. And I worked in a company owned by a 30 years old guy that was really really friendly, and I finished the apprentice. I still worked for
What kind of job was it?
worked as a farm of veggie production, and also like
Okay.
other crops like wheat and colza and other. That was really interesting, but it was still in a productive like capitalistic thing, of course. But it was really interesting to learn like the basics of agriculture, and in this case horticulture. But so like I started from that, but then when I came back in Sicily, like the starting an agriculture activity was really difficult, because in France you get a lot of subsidies, you get a lot of help from the government. In Italy, it's not exactly the same. You need to be already like the son of an agriculture. Like nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to work in agriculture, of course, because it's economically it's like really difficult to start from nothing. And so I'm basically doing landscaping.
Can you define landscaping for me?
How do you say?
Okay, I got it.
Normal maintenance of garden.
Okay.
But even because um, everybody here doesn't make only ornamental. We all want to have like a fig tree, like mandarin, like whatever, and mostly olive trees, of course. And yeah, I come to the point like that now. I have the experience also to finally we can work on the oliviculture. So that's really interesting. So we can finally like bring the cool thing, like the food.
Well, I would like to add that one of the bridges here, because Matthieu is actually a very skilled site plan designer. So if you look at a landscape, or you look at a farm, you have to do a digital design. Like traditionally, permaculturalists did like hand drawings, but now like the technology has evolved. We have online design tools, so that we can create a map of the future site, put in the trees, and then actually get a much better picture of what the production potential is going to be. And I think this is where it gets exciting with Refi, is to say, okay, we have this site plan. We're going to plant, 100 avocado trees uh, on contour, uh, with soil building, cover crops, mulching, like basically taking all of the regenerative practices, crunching the numbers, and then we can kind of get to a place where we can actually model how much regeneration potential there is. Because right now, nobody's paying Matthieu for permaculture site designs, but that's the most critical, most valuable thing that we actually can be doing. Um, so it's this like transition of how do we bring in some liquidity to pay for the meaningful work to get us to the next phase. So we're at the point now where we can take that digital site plan, upload it, and then create an NFT or NFTs, or portfolio of NFTs, to say each tree is represented. We actually have kind of like a resource management plan in place, and we can start to bring in some of that finance to help kickstart and bootstrap. So I think this is where liquidity pools can actually be really, really critical, to say we have a local area, we bring in money into a DAO. That DAO can then be managed by the local community to then put in funding to these critical regenerative projects. So this is kind of at the point where we're experimenting, um, and we have a really nice plan in place. We're going to be doing avocados, mangoes, moringa in a Mediterranean setting, which is
Nice.
really exciting because it hasn't been done before. And of course, Sicily has such a unique climate where, North Africa, South Europe, which one is it? It's both. So we have a really cool setting, and we've partnered with a local, we'll call him an elder, even though he's young at heart. He's got a beautiful farm that's currently half olive production and then half wheat production. So we're going to take the part that's doing the wheat production. We're going to basically put in a syntropic agroforestry system, use that as a demonstration training site to bring in other local farmers, as well as people from around the Mediterranean or around the world, whoever wants to come and learn. And then we can start to export the education. And I think that's the catalyst, is just investing in the community to give them the knowledge and tools, because the people have the desire. They want to transition away from chemical monocropping, and but they need the tools and they need the financial resources to help kickstart that.
Cool. And when is the event that you said in fall?
So the olive harvest is in October. So
Okay.
there's a very packed schedule of events. So we're hoping that after Ethereum Rome is, I think, like the first week of October. We're hoping that the second week of October we can be hosting an event here. It would be over the course of a week. We'd have people coming hands-on to participate in the olive harvest, participate in the planting, also making seed balls, meeting with other artisans around the community, and start to map out this regional economy and figure out, okay, how can we start to bring this more on chain, as well as, what are the practicalities of this regenerative agricultural process. So I think normally people lead with the tech and then they get lost. What we're trying to do is lead with the culture, and then we can appropriately choose the tools that we need for the specific job.
You mentioned seed balls and syntropic agriculture or syntropic methods. Can you define both?
Matthieu, you want to take this one, or should I?
Seed ball, yeah, I can do that.
Que pale, que pale.
Is the term we use for this, like pale. No, it's like this little balls that if anybody can make. It's really simple. They're made by clay, but basically the idea is to put the seed, whatever seed inside, and so that just protecting it from birds, from animals, from whatever. And because it's clay, it's keeping the humidity and the water from the rain, and just let germinate the seed inside the bowl. And so you don't even, like, theoretically, you don't even need to bury it. You don't even need to do anything than just launching it, and then some of them will grow. So that comes from natural farming, which is a way of farming that Masanobu Fukuoka in Japan was making for 40 years. And it's really interesting. It's really simple. It's not even a method. What he's always saying is, like, don't do anything. And so it's interesting. It's really interesting. And syntropic agriculture is more complex. It's more a new thing also, and it's a real agricultural method. So still, like, making the lines, still, like, using machines, etc. But meanwhile, you produce, you're also regenerating. So mimic the nature, so mimic the forest, to, like, have both the production and both the regeneration. So it's a technique that have been theorized by Ernst Gotch in.
Yeah, so it's funny because this Ernst Gosch guy is actually, is he Austrian or
It's
from Switzerland or something like that? He was
yeah,
a
yeah. It's so crazy.
well. Either way, this European guy went to Brazil,
Sorry.
and Ernst Gosch went to Brazil because over there they had, palm tree uh, clear cutting, and that's where he developed it in a tropical setting. So syntropic agroforestry has traditionally been a tropical set of plants that grow together. Meanwhile, there has been experimentation in the Mediterranean setting, mostly in Portugal. So Portugal is kind of leading the way in the Mediterranean syntropic agroforestry design. And there was an Italian guy who went to Portugal, discovered syntropic agroforestry, and he's now teaching syntropic agroforestry to Italians from Portugal. And we took his
Nice.
class. We were able to come up with a locally adapted syntropic agroforestry system, And now we're in the process of kind of setting up the plants, setting up the nursery. And as we're doing this, it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? So we're kind of like step by step growing together. So we're in the process now of kind of creating the planting the seeds so that when fall comes, we can actually put the plants in place in the ground right before the rain. Just from syntropic agroforestry, it makes sense because you're getting higher yields. You're not using chemicals. Um, it can be integrated into a larger permaculture scale design. Um, but yeah, I right now we're at the point where can we get a do a fundraiser to get some money together to pay for the school to set up for like a year or two, and then kind of grow from there. And I will add one final thing: we are experimenting with NFTs for both membership, and I was really excited to see you shared what was the investment plan for the grass-fed beef? Your friend
Yeah, Pascal.it. IT, yeah.
Right. So people are already doing this, but they're
Yeah, they're
doing it
not
in
my
an off.
friends. I'm just invested on that.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, they're friendly, huh? But I mean, I guess the
Off
idea
chain
is
methods,
it's
yeah.
already happening off chain. These business models already exist. How can we adapt them to on chain? And then what else can we play around with? So I think there's both an experimentation with the agriculture and experimentation with the digital economics. So this is very exciting. I think we're actually like very innovative. And you wouldn't think like, okay, Sicily is like actually
Yeah.
doing something new, but it is happening, and not from any like top down organization.
Yeah. Speaking of animals, how does animal fits in all of this? Because I know permaculture doesn't. It's not only about agriculture. It's also about farming and so on, right? Is there anything in Sicily already that's taking into account this?
Not like northern place where you can get easily cows and horses because there's more sheep here.
Yeah, more ricotta.
Sheep, yeah. And you can the cool thing about the sheep, for example, the culture of the shepherd here is that like historically, like they were how do you say grazing, not in their lands, but like anywhere like it was possible. So even like vineyards, for example, that was good for the vineyards owners because they were basically like just cleaning the land, you know. So yeah,
And is it integrated with the agriculture already, or it's just two separate things?
yeah, like anywhere else in the world, like the path is like going to the separation. So they're no more doing that, or people, for example, think that if ships pass from your place, that will be like bad for you, etc. And but yeah, there's still a culture. There's still something like ancestral that I think people get it when for example they finish a culture and they give the straw bales to the shepherd or the shepherd give the manure to the agriculture. That's still existing, but it's going like out of the mind of the new generation mostly. But now we are taking back this kind of like integrating culture. So yeah.
Matthew, do you want to talk
Okay,
about
cool.
Valdibella?
Valdibella. Yeah, it's one of the new. It's one of the only cooperative I like that are working like a real cooperative, not the fake one. Like for example for the Cantina Sant'Antonio or whatever. Like they're really like a group of people that are deciding everything on about like how much how what's the price of selling, what how we will use the tools that we share, etc., etc. So that's really interesting.
And also saving the seeds and preserving that genetic diversity.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got that. Yeah, and also now they started around the school for agricultural technique. So like combining the
So for high school.
no, it's open school to anybody who wants to participate. You just need to
Oh, nice.
for every course, every module, you just pay like a really symbolic price, and then you get the full day immersion on, for example, insect.
Certificates, I guess.
Final story is Sette Bello. So we want to encourage farmers to transition to syntropic agroforestry, to soil building. So we're creating a producer cooperative for people that are producing in a syntropic way, that we can create a brand so that we can market better to the international market. And then for people who want to either become members, pre-purchase the harvest through NFTs, so that when basically you buy the NFT, and then when the olive oil gets shipped, the NFT gets burned. So we are going to be experimenting with that this fall, because every year the olive harvest switched between like low and high yields. So last year was a low yield year. This year will be a high yield year. So we're actually anticipating a bigger harvest. Meanwhile, in Spain, they're actually going to have a lower harvest because of drought. So the price of olive oil is going to go up. Our production is going to go up. So it's just a matter of us getting more organized, getting more kind of bringing our production power together, while also creating more consolidated consumer demand. So if you can basically, if we want to ship to the US, it's actually better to put that shipment together and then put it on a pallet and then ship it. But we're trying to kind of organize in a different way. And then, of course, Sette Bello is the scopa, and it's like a cultural icon, and also kind of considered like the highest quality. So how do we create quality with the appropriate price and reinvest that investment into the farm and the community? So Sette Bello is the regenerative agricultural products, kind of like if we could compete with Italy, Italy, the brand, or the shopping market experience, where they basically like take all of the small producers and put it into a big shopping mall, but it's like, you still have the middleman. So how do we get rid of the middleman? How do we empower the farmers? How do we create a bigger cultural and human connection with the consumers? And we're starting. I'm just shipping oil back to family and friends back in the U.S. and because they've never tasted anything like this. Because everything you're eating from the store is just like has no flavor. So how do we actually appropriately value this product? And that's a interesting question, because in the traditional globalized economy, we don't have a really good metric for valuing the regenerative production. So look forward to that. It's going to be tied in with the Refi Sicilia event.
If we can make a very liquid market for these local products, it will be great.
Well, the issue right now is we actually have too much liquidity.
Yeah, maybe buy side, maybe.
Because the farmers are great
also
at
this
producing.
year you don't have the competition from Puglia.
Right,
Too
exactly.
much.
But Puglia needs to needs reinvestment to regrow. Yeah, and I think it's how do we get the consumers more educated, as well as how do you reduce the friction. But we're talking, this is literally liquidity. This is liquid olive oil. And so when we talk about liquidity pools, we're actually talking about how do we bring these farmers together, because everybody's sitting on inventory right now. Every farmer around here, even it was a low harvest year, everybody still has liquid olive oil in inventory just sitting. So we really need to get more organized. We need to kind of connect the dots better. And I feel that crypto, blockchain, DeFi can actually help to create a more appropriately circulating, healthy economy that actually helps to regenerate the ecology and the culture.
Exactly. Very nice. I think it's a very nice place to close this, because I don't want to waste your time. But thank you both for joining this. You told me a lot of interesting insights about what's already working and what you're working on, and I'll be happy to learn more about these things. I will provide some links wherever I will post this episode of what you talked. And yeah, I think I will be very happy to join eventually in October if you do the event.
We'll come in October, and then next year we do Refi Puglia.
Get me some free tickets, please.
And it's a beautiful thing, because there's actually a renaissance happening in Italy around regenerative agriculture, the Regenaissance. So it's beautiful to see like the younger generation come back to the land, self-organize, and
Really?
actually create something beautiful. Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. But we'll look forward to seeing you in October. We'll give you the VIP pass. I wish you the best of luck in your creative expression journey and the podcast. And yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Ciao.